Hey everyone, my name is Greg Marsh. I'm the founder of a company called KeyMe. And, whoa. Some of these are right. All right, I'll roll with this and see what happens. But I'm going to talk to you guys about raising money, my experience raising money. We've gone through several fundraises, different stages, different types of investors, different structures. We've learned a whole bunch through that process. Fundraising to begin with is very challenging. Fundraising for a hardware startup is even more challenging. So very quick background on what we do. We are disrupting the locksmith industry. And there are 3 core services that we provide. The first is key duplication. So you have like a physical brass key, you need a copy of that. The second is copying car keys, particularly those with like a transponder chip. And then third is residential lockouts. So we are providing all 3 of those services with these 2 tech platforms. From a mobile app, you can actually physically scan your key. So we use computer vision to extract all the geometrical features of the key. If you want a copy, you can order it in the app. We'll cut and ship you a perfect copy in the mail. More interestingly, if you get locked out, you can visit our second platform, which is this retail kiosk. They're in places like Bed Bath & Beyond, Rite Aid, 7-Eleven, Albertson Safeway, Kroger. We're in about 20 states right now. You can actually log into the kiosk, access your digital keychain, and print out a physical key on the spot. So instead of paying a locksmith a couple $100 to come and break your door, we can get you a key very quickly and conveniently. And then lastly, if you just have a regular key and you want a copy, you can insert it into that little green ring. We will analyze it in real time. If it's a regular key, it'll come out in about a minute. If it is a car key, we also have an antenna wrapped around that green ring, and we can scan the transponder information from the chip of your key, and you put in an address, and we'll program and ship you a car key at about half the price of the dealer. So that's sort of the nutshell. We've gone through a couple of different fundraisers. We've raised about $70 million so far. Started a couple years ago with very early stage rounds and have kind of slowly grown the company. But I've learned a tremendous amount going through this process, and would love to share like a hodgepodge of those learnings with you guys. Are you guys getting feedback, or is that just me? Should I talk without it? Okay. So raising money for hardware is very, very hard. There is a very well-known bias from the investment committee against hardware, and a lot of that's for good reason. Like there are disadvantages to hardware companies, and that's really kind of these top bullets here. However, there's also like really great attributes of hardware, and that's sort of on the bottom here. So as I've gone through all these fundraisers, the things that I've tried to do a better job of is addressing the concerns up top and really doing a good job articulating these things on the bottom to get people excited. So the fundamental way that I've come to pitch is off unit economics. So I know there's lots of different types of hardware, but I believe most hardware are driven off of unit economics. And for me, this is like the slide that helped us raise money. So this is really the foundation for all of our pitches, is like on a unit basis, how quality are those economics. So you sell it for some amount of money, it costs some amount of money, and then you've got direct operating costs, and after that, how much is left? So in this example, or I actually think the math is incorrect, the 2 out of 5 would be like a 40% contribution margin. And hardware is unique in that that contribution margin is typically a lot better than other types of businesses. So by really getting people excited by the quality of these unit economics, that's how I found to really generate strong interest. And these are units which most investors will appreciate and understand and get excited by, hopefully. One other thing I think is early on, a lot of entrepreneurs have a hard time putting this together because they don't know how much they're going to sell it for. They don't know how much it's going to cost. But it's important to get data no matter what. So survey people, do research, come up with some rough estimates that are defensible. But I don't see how it would be possible to raise money for a hardware startup without some shape or form of this. So for us, this has been like the pillar slide of how we've raised money. Once we've gotten people excited by what it looks like on a unit basis, then the question is okay, how big can that be? How quick can you scale it? And the way we've tried to address that is really with a market size slide. And we we tend to look at market size from like a top-down as well as a bottom-up perspective. So on the top-down, I think this is the traditional way that people look at market size. It's like, how much money are people spending on this problem? So for us, it's about $7.5 billion bucks, and these pie segments are like the 3 services that we provide. So the goal here is to convey that like it's big and a lot of money is being spent. So the bottom-up is conveying how you get large with like feasible assumptions. So again, using our slides as an example, in the brick and mortar retail stores that we operate in, there's about 150,000 of those stores in the US. Our goal is to get to about 20,000 of those. So that's about a 13% retail penetration rate, which all of a sudden doesn't seem so big, and with like a reasonable assumption like that, we can justify a very big valuation. So this is the slide that we've used to like take the unit economics and show how we scale them up to get large and make it like believable. One other very hard lesson, which I learned in the early days, is when we were just like a pitch deck and had some pieces of hardware, I felt kind of like full of shit pitching a $5 billion business. To me, that was like so large that I thought we'd erode confidence in us. So that was a big mistake, in that VCs have such large funds these days that they want single exits which can move the whole fund. And to do that, you need a multi-billion-dollar exit. So if you're pitching a business which in the most successful scenario is going to be a couple $100 million, like I think a lot of VCs will consider that like a lifestyle business, like they just won't participate. So that was a very big lesson, which we actually lost like quality investors as a result of like not thinking big enough. So strategics is another thing I think that comes up in hardware quite a bit. I think with distribution and manufacturing and electronic companies, there's just a lot more non-VC money out there. So there's a lot of ways to think about strategics. I don't think there are any sort of blanket answers. I think it's all case by case. However, I think these are like important questions to ask. So I think the most important one is like, how competitive is that strategic? So are they making a product that is similar to yours? So for us, 7-Eleven is a strategic investor. They're obviously like not making kiosks, but they're also a customer of ours. And that's been a very positive relationship. Maybe equally important is the second piece here. So really asking yourself, are you both aligned on what the goal is for the money? So I think it's really important to directly ask the strategic what they look to get out of this investment and to make sure that's aligned with you. And oftentimes I don't think it is, but that can lead to big problems later on. And then lastly, like if you do take strategic money, I think it's really important to think about the mechanics of the deal. So I would be very thoughtful about limiting board seats, control, power, much more so than a traditional VC. And then also information rights. Like if you have to give up customer information for someone else that's going to spook them, that could be very bad. So being really thoughtful in the docs and the mechanics to make sure that they're limited in what they can do. So another thing that comes up is IP. I think IP is massively misunderstood by entrepreneurs, by really smart investors. Most people view it as a way to get like a monopoly in a space and like eliminate competition, which almost never ever happens. Like it's just not how it's used practically. So there's lots of ways IP is used. This is general to startup land, but I think these are probably 90% of how IP is actually used in practice. So the first is really for larger companies to bully smaller companies. If I have $100 million in my balance sheet and some company raises $1 million and they've got a competing product that's scary, I can make them spend a lot of money on IP litigation, even if there's not much base to that claim. And this happens a lot. The second is for companies that are actually getting beat in the market to use this as like a Hail Mary to try and prevent that company that's actually beating them in the market from succeeding. So a lot of investors want IP primarily because they think it's some positive or it's a box to check. My 2 cents on this is it's worth doing a provisional patent, which allows you to check the box for the investor, say yes that you have patents pending. It's a very cheap option. So it costs about $1,000. You have to defer all the hard work of creating claims until you actually file the real patent application. You get a filing date. But I view it as cheap insurance. And then in 1 year, you can choose whether to do all the work and money of actually doing the real patent application. And then what I'll finish on is, I think pitching is a skill just like anything else, where the amount of time you put in, the practice really is what makes you succeed. So, for me, every time, we got our ass kicked by an investor or someone really smart pass on us, I tried to take 5 minutes of their time and understand, what their concerns were. And rather than get defensive about that, tried to use that as a lesson learned to tweak my pitch next time. And that iteration is what I think let our pitch evolve so much over time and let us actually raise the money that we have. But I think it's a very developable skill that requires practice. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with the group. And just for context, you've become sort of good at this because you've raised $75 million in venture money and strategic. So congratulations. When did you, so you have, I think, 7-Eleven and other strategics. At what stage did you get those guys on board?
So 7-Eleven was our first retail partner. And in Manhattan, we gave them 5 kiosks. And they were kind of unique in that they also had an emerging venture fund, and there was just they really liked the value they were providing in their stores. They had lots of great insights on retail. So, questions like, hey, should we put a bill acceptor in the kiosk? And being able to talk to them about what % of their customers use cash versus credit. It's not like widely available information, but things that they were able to help us understand quickly. So, they've been an amazing investor for us, and continue to be a big part of the rollout.
Right. And okay, I'm starting to see some hands. One of you guys has questions, and if I have time, I'll ask mine. We'll just switch this time. The gentleman over here.
How do you see this business going forward? Like a few years from now, if people are not using any keys and everything is digitalized, how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one, VCs are probably some of the more forward-thinking crowd out there, so we've got that a lot. Keys will go away at some point. It will take a while, and to sort of quantify that, the primary reason that keys have not changed in like 100+ years is because the hardware on your door has a cycle time of about 30 to 35 years. You compare that to like car keys. Car keys have changed a lot in the last 5, 10, 15 years because the cycle time for a car is so much lower. So when you look at the adoption rates necessary to really move the needle for the market and physically retrofit hundreds of millions of locks, it will happen, but under like insane, absurd adoption rates where tomorrow every single new home doesn't have a physical key, every renovation doesn't have a physical key, and then people just start replacing their locks at very high rates. Maybe in like 10 years, 15 years, keys will decline by 7%, 10%. So, we plan on building a multi-billion-dollar business in the next 36 months. And I think we've got a very clear vision to do that. So we're very big on like focus and execution. But in a decade, it's probably a problem that we'll have to start thinking about.
It was a great presentation. It was as much about this really cool company as raising money, the function. Can you comment about how the function of your investment banker helped you raise these multiple rounds with great investors?
Yeah, so I'm not sure which investment banker you're talking about, but our last round.
Did you have one, I guess, is a question.
Well, so yeah, our last round we did debt for the first time, and to facilitate that process, we had a third party help broker that. So all of the equity, we did ourselves. When we raised debt for the first time, given that was a brand new thing for us, we thought it was worth the cost of having someone facilitate that. Yeah.
It's actually really interesting. So you raised debt very later on?
Yeah, so most of our money in the company, all the equity dollars we've raised, 90% of it has gone towards like building kiosks. So, that's like a fairly expensive source of capital. As we have really proven out the unit economics and started to get visibility to like strong cash flow as a company, trying to like decrease that cost of capital. So at the end of last year, we did some mezz debt, and then as we continue to scale, try and get cheaper and cheaper sources of capital.
And for context, the reason why I ask the question is that you see a lot of hardware companies starting to leverage venture debt as early as a Series A stage. So
we did do venture debt. I'm very positive on venture debt. I know there's like lots of different opinions out there. I think overall, venture debt is the most mispriced security out there. Like they're taking equity risk with very capped upside and lots of downside, like 100% downside. So as an entrepreneur, I would take as much of that as I can possibly get. I believe banks are starting to dial back risk a little bit there, but like I would take as much of that as I can get. I think it's the cheapest money an early stage company can get.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. 2 questions. First, do people misuse it? Do they take pictures of keys? And have you heard of break-ins or things like that? And what do you do with that? Secondly, can you talk a little bit about the manufacturing process?
Yeah, both good questions. So security is like paramount to our business. When you look at the current method by which keys are made, so you go to a locksmith, they have no idea who you are. They don't know what keys you're making. They have no way to hold anyone accountable for the keys they're making. So right now, someone with malicious intentions will go to a locksmith. Like there's just zero accountability. What is really cool is that for the first time ever, we're actually able to introduce accountability into the space by the digital nature that we're making keys. So for every transaction, we have a financial paper trail. We have a security camera image of the person. We know what key they made. There's a whole lot of accountability that's never existed before. One kind of cool way to crystallize that is oftentimes if we go into a new retailer, they'll be all excited, and then at the end they're like, hey, but we have this one key that goes to our back office, and we don't want you guys to copy that. And our response to that is, well, it's okay, we can disable it if you want, but what you really want is us to enable it and give you an alert if anyone's trying to copy that key. Because if we're not making it, someone's going to the locksmith down the road, and you guys have no clue. So that kind of like crystallizes the additional information that we have. So to directly answer your question, we've never had an actual incident. We have a former chief of police who was the guy who caught the Boston bomber. So he heads up all our law enforcement liaison. We've had law enforcement come out of the woodwork to help us solve like these mysterious break-ins, and we can actively see if anyone has made that key in our platform, and we've never had an issue. But we do have like pretty strong ties with law enforcement. And then the second question on manufacturing, we use a company called Benchmark Electronics. They make some of iRobot stuff, like the Roomba vacuum cleaner. They're global facilities, but we use their Rochester, Minnesota facility. So our kiosks are built in Minnesota. They're put on a pallet, and then our team takes ownership of it, and we ship it to retailers.
Hello? Yeah. Can you talk more about the retail partnerships that you were able to create? Like, how do you go about doing that? And also maybe you could share some of the economics. Like, do you pay rent to them, or how does the economics work?
Yeah, so we followed like Redbox and Coinstar's model, if you're familiar with those kiosks. So Redbox is a DVD self-service kiosk. They have about 45,000 locations. Coinstar is you put your coins in and you get cash from the store. They have about 25,000. So we own and operate. We pay for the machine, we own the machine. Customers pay us directly. We're in charge of all the servicing, all the break fix of the machine. And we give basically the retailer, we need 3 square feet and a plug from them. In exchange, we generate the densest cash flow in the store, typically by about 10x. So the only thing that can sometimes generate denser cash flow is the pharmacy and like a Rite Aid. But what they really like is we drive really substantial traffic. So when we go into a new store, we get that store listed as a place to make keys on Google Maps and other places. So when new people move into the area, we drive them into the store. And that checks a huge box for these retailers. Brick and mortar retailers are getting annihilated by e-commerce, and they are so hungry for extra footsteps. We can drive really strong, scalable traffic of a customer who is making like really big shopping loyalty decisions. So between the cash flow and the traffic, it's generated really, really strong retail demand. So actually the biggest challenge we've had as a company in the last like 24 months has been the level of retail demand versus the number of kiosks we actually have available, which sounds like a good problem, but it's actually so big, it is a big problem. We have retailers requesting about 15,000 kiosks from us right now, and we have like 500 out. We're building about 10 per day are being built and deployed, but we're really just starting to hit our stride on manufacturing.
One last question over there.
Okay, again, a fantastic presentation. Again, with the threats, how about the 3D printing of keys, or how's that as far as?
Yeah, we view 3D printing very positively in that the more places you can use our information to physically create a key, the better. So for example, if you had a 3D printer in your house that had the quality to print a key, we would love to be able to talk to it and print the key out, and that would be a much more convenient method of getting that key to you. So currently, we've 3D printed keys. A typical consumer 3D printer doesn't usually have the materials or the resolution necessary to copy it super well. It can work, but it's not great. As that changes and quality goes up and ubiquity goes up, we would love to leverage that by letting people just access their keys in more convenient places.
If there's something sort of fascinating, I'm going completely off course here, but I mean, you're building a distributed network of hardware that can create objects based on a centrally located database of digital images, right? So you could imagine how KeyMe eventually becomes this sort of 3D printing network where everything you want to create, you could create through the machines. I think I read something about this a long time ago. Is that still part of the plan, or you don't care because you have such a large market with keys that this is, the sort of 20-year plan type thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We actually use subtractive manufacturing in the kiosk. We physically store thousands of key blanks, and we have a robotic system that'll cut it down. So we're not using 3D printing in the kiosk, but leveraging that hardware outside of the kiosk is attractive. We definitely are thinking, we have a very creative team, and there are non-key items that we've thought a lot about, but we've tried real hard to keep the blinders on. But there are some cool other small objects that we think would be really interesting, but we could, one of the hardest things I've tried to do is straddle scope and focus, and we're trying to stay pretty focused. But
yeah. Well, since you've done a remarkable job at all of this, so thank you very much for all of this and sharing with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.